Welcome to the Why Not podcast with me, Chrissy Hawkins. In a world where everybody always asks you why, I'm here to ask why not. I'm going to do that by breaking down the mindsets of guests and my own to figure out what makes people say, why not? Hi guys, welcome back to Why Not. So today I have got Cill O'Connor on the podcast. Cill O'Connor is a strength coach and also an online and in-person trainer. So we're going to talk actually about fitness in relation to men today, and we're actually kind of going away from the women and talking about all about men today. And he works primarily with men. And we just talk about some of the differences or some of the similarities we find in between men and women, and we also talk about things that he doesn't like that he sees in the industry, and we bring up the whole consistency talk again. So, as ever, I just want you to sit back and relax or walk and listen, but here is my podcast with Cill O'Connor. Hi guys, welcome back to Why Not. Today I've got Cill O'Connor. So Cill O'Connor is a strength coach, and I'm going to let Cill O'Connor tell us a little bit more about himself. So welcome to the podcast, Cill. How are you?
I'm good, Chrissy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So would you like to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a strength coach, like you said. I do personal training with people. I'm not sure if I fully identify with being a personal trainer just because of some of the connotations that come with the title, but I guess that is what I do with people. And I do online coaching with people as well, programming and that sort of stuff. And I've been doing that for a good few years now. I was working in strength and conditioning for a while and doing some studies related to that, like a bachelor's and a master's degree. And then, just kind of along the way, I realized that I much preferred working with people in a one-on-one capacity.
Okay. And when you were doing your bachelor's and your master's, like what were you focused more on team sports, was it, or?
I think like I initially so I'm not a sporty person at all. I was absolutely terrible at sports when I was younger, and no exaggeration when I say that, like I was literally the last person picked for every single team in PE or whatever. So I think my family were like very shocked when I did get into fitness eventually, and developed like a big passion for it and decided that it was what I wanted to do as a career. So initially, it took a while for me to come around to that because I initially did a different degree in Trinity and dropped out of that, and then went back in to do a bachelor's in health and performance science in UCD, and then a master's in S&C from St. Mary's in Twickenham. And so, I think I wanted to do, my dream was to maybe work with like an NFL team or something like that. And I don't know, I guess it's just like the most kind of prestigious job in S&C in the sense that they tend to be the ones that pay the best. So it just kind of stood out to me as like, well, if I want to be like really good at my job, I should try to get into doing something like that. And I'm a fan of American football as well, so that appealed to me too. So that was the route that I thought that I wanted to take for a long time. But I did a few internships and got some experience with doing strength and conditioning coaching. And I guess it wasn't really everything that I thought it would be. I think a lot of people have that experience after trying it out. Like the burnout rate is very high. And while I was doing that, I'd been working in a CrossFit gym to kind of help make ends meet, taking classes and stuff like that. And part of that was taking people for personal training. And I realized that I actually really enjoyed that an awful lot more, like having the full control over what somebody does in their training, not having competing demands from like them doing loads of other stuff then when they go out to do like they're on the field training and having matches and stuff like that. And I think I kind of just realized ultimately I don't really care very much about sports outside of just being like a fan. Like I get an awful lot more sense of accomplishment as a coach from taking somebody from, barely being able to do a push-up to being able to do like 20, and then like being able to barely squat the bar to being able to squat their body weights for 5 or 10 reps. Like I think that ultimately that has a much bigger impact on somebody's life than taking somebody who's already like a very good athlete and then maybe being able to add like a few percents to their performance, if even that. It's like a very gray area. So yeah, that's how I got into doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I feel like that happens to a lot of like personal trainers or coaches, whatever. They go in going, yeah, I'm going to train athletes. And then like 6 months in, they're like, actually, no, this is way more fun.
Yeah. I guess it's just that there's this pretty understandable conception in your head that like, you know, I'm going to go away and do all this education and learn all the intricacies of strength training, programming and conditioning and all these different exercises. And the way I'm going to get to use that is by training somebody who's like the elite of the elite. And then you actually get to working with people who are very good athletes in their sports and realize that actually a lot of them are at best maybe like intermediates in the gym. Like there's a big difference between being really good at your sport and being really strong or really powerful or advanced enough that you would need to start pulling out loads of wacky tools from your coaching kit to help somebody. Like I've probably had to learn more about the intricacies of programming and helping people overcome plateaus from coaching just regular people whose only interest is in getting stronger in the gym versus somebody who's like a GAA athlete who only has time to train like a couple times a week and then the rest of the time is doing loads of other stuff, and you only need to get them like a little bit stronger to have it impact their sport. So I think like I just realized that my role wasn't as significant as I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
Most sports, it depends on the sport, obviously, but for a lot of sports, especially the ones that are really popular, like ball sports, like unless you have like a base level of very, very good skill, it doesn't matter if you put like 100 kilos on somebody's deadlift. Like if that was what you needed to be great at GAA, I'd be playing for a county football team because I'm stronger than all the guys that I trained,
Yeah.
but I'd be shit at catching the ball overhead, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. What is your kind of age group, or do you have a kind of general population that you generally work with, or are you across the board?
Um, Fairly across the board. I think probably the group of people that I relate to the most are probably like young men or men kind of in like the age category of like late teens up to maybe mid 30s or so. Um, and I only say that just because I can relate most to them in the sense that, like I said, I wasn't sporty at all. So I love taking somebody who's failed loads of times at trying to get into fitness, and lifting weights is the thing that like clicks with them and they actually become really interested in, and they get like a huge sense of accomplishment and improvements in their self-esteem from that. I've trained plenty of people who are outside that demographic. I've trained lots of women, I've trained lots of older people, and actually training older people is very rewarding as well. If you can get somebody from, you know, barely being able to sit up out of a chair to being able to do that, like I said, 10, 15 times, like with some weights or whatever. But that's probably like the demographic that I relate the most to, just because it's similar to the journey that I had in fitness.
Yeah. Do you find a lot of men who aren't into sports are getting into the gym now in later life?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, all of my friends that I can think of who are into lifting and have kind of stuck with it for the long term, probably had the experience of like trying other mainstream sports like rugby or football and stuff like that, and realized that they weren't good at it. And but that didn't mean that they weren't able to be athletic. It just meant that those weren't the right things for like their skills. So I think that a lot of people have the experience of trying to do a sport that they're expected to be good at, and then end up finding that something nice and straightforward like lifting weights is a much more enjoyable outlet for that, because there's like very few barriers to entry to it. You just get a gym membership, you go in, you can follow a program by yourself. You don't have to have a coach necessarily. You don't have to have a whole team of other people around you. And so I mean, I would assume there's more people going to the gym now than ever before.
Yeah.
Now, whether they're doing it for the right or the wrong reasons, I think is probably a different discussion. Like, I don't relate to people who are going to the gym for purely aesthetic reasons. Like, I don't do like before and after photos with people of like their shirts off or stuff like that. Cause I don't think, for me, it's not like maybe like a psychologically healthy way of viewing training.
Yeah.
So I'm always more interested in like helping people improve their performance, which I think improves like their mental state and their confidence and belief in themselves. And like obviously changes in your body are a nice side effect that come from that. I'd be lying if I said I don't like the fact that my shoulders are bigger now than when I started off training when I was like 15 or 16. But I think if that's like the main thing that you're focused on, I just see I've encountered a lot of guys that I think have borderline body dysmorphia or whatever, stuff like that, from just constantly focusing on that. So yeah, there's more people than ever going to the gym, and a lot of guys get into the gym, but I would just hope that they do it for the right reasons, you know.
Yeah. Do you find when guys come to you that they are looking to improve performance, or do they start off with an aesthetic goal and then it kind of changes?
Yeah, I've had that happen a lot. And I mean, that was kind of what I wanted when I started training as well. Like, I wanted to look a certain way, and I cared about strength as well. But I definitely wouldn't have been happy if I spent like a year of training really hard and I saw no change in like the way that my body looked. So I would say the majority come in wanting that. But they have to be on board with the idea that like it's going to be driven by looking to improve your performance.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to track the weights that you do when you come in. We're going to try to progress those a little bit each time. And then you'll more often than not be really happy with the changes you see in your body composition then as an end result of that. But anytime that I've had somebody come in and it's all about aesthetics, and I'm like, and they're like, oh, I want to learn how to get like that V taper look, and I want to do like an exercise that's going to like change the shape of my pec or whatever. More often than not, with people like that, I kind of just end up saying like, I don't think that I'm the right person to do this with you, because it's
Yeah.
not my skill set. It's not something that I'm comfortable with. And yeah, it's just not really like my philosophy around training. So it wouldn't be a good fit if somebody was just focused on that. But a lot of people change from being like, I'm doing this because I want to look better, to, well, I actually care way more about like improving my performance.
Yeah. Yeah. I just it's interesting to ask you because like I find like as with women, they all just like, they all want to be skinny basically. And it's just interesting to hear from like, a male perspective, are men coming in with similar things? It's not really talked about so much in comparison to women.
Yeah, but it's a real thing, you know. I won't say the name out of respect, but a guy that I was in college with and who built a very big online following with like a lot of focus around those kind of things only passed away there recently from a body like eating disorder, or like it was something like that. But I think people don't realize that like it's not as black and white as going to the gym is healthy and not going to the gym is unhealthy. Like anything done to excess or with like an unhealthy narrative attached to it can be bad for you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I used to have this kind of thing about like, oh, going to the gym is therapy. And it is to a certain extent. Like, it improves your mental health and it's definitely a big stress reliever. But at a certain point, you have to address stuff that's going on in your life as well. And you can't just keep on stuffing that down underneath 10 by 10 back squats, you know? And just like, I saw that a lot in CrossFit as well. Like, people who just wanted to be in immense amounts of pain and dripping in a pool of their sweat and barely be able to breath. And that was something that had to happen every time they went to the gym in order for them to feel like they were satisfied with themselves and the effort that they'd put in. And so like, fitness is important 100%, but like I just see a lot of people have it like engulf their entire identity and who they are, and it's not a healthy way to approach it. It should just kind of be like one aspect of your life, and you need to address all the other stuff as well.
Yeah, I get that. I think that's an across board thing as well. You know, people think they haven't had a good workout if they're not dripping in sweat and like near passing out.
Yeah, that's something that um I end up having to kind of, more for people who've maybe gone to the gym for a while and might have been getting information from other sources. I end up having to drill that into them a lot, that like it's not like, in the same way that like smoking a pack of cigarettes on one day isn't going to give you lung cancer, and doing a really amazing workout on one day is going to make very little difference to the actual results that you see in the long term. um like your health and performance is all about an accumulation of what are seemingly really mundane average workouts strung together. So all I really care about when somebody comes into the gym, and what I try to get them to focus on, is, did we make any progress today? And if we did, then if you extrapolate that out over a few weeks and months, and if you manage to keep that going, you'd actually make gigantic progress. And that's a hard thing for people to grasp, because like people naturally compare themselves to other people. With guys especially, they want to try adding like 10 kilos to their bench press every time they come into the gym. And I have to just stop them and say, like think about this realistically. If you actually manage to do that, let's not say even every session, let's say I'm going to be kind and say you added 10 kilos to your bench press every week. Are you telling me that that's going to work for like 10 weeks and you're going to add 100 kilos to your bench press? Like, nobody is going to do that. So just take like a smart approach, take small little jumps. And when you actually look back in a few weeks' time, you'll be much further ahead than the average person who's going in just trying to do as much as they can every single time.
Do you find they struggle with that, like being held back in a sense?
Yeah, some people do. I think it helps, like what I was saying at the start about like the people that I relate to the most are young guys like that, is that I can speak from experience and say, look, I'm not making this up. I tried it myself. I tried it lots of times. I got lots of injuries from it. I got lots of plateaus from it. And I got lots of very frustrated days as a result. So I can tell you from experience that I got the best progress when I just trusted the process, went in, tried to do a little bit more than last time, and didn't get too much in my head about trying to compare myself to this person or that person or whatever. I thought about that yesterday, actually, because I had a really bad workout for my deadlift yesterday. And 10 years prior to that, I would have gotten really pissed off at myself and tried to just throw more weight on the bar and tried to kind of like outwork the bad day. And that was at a time when I was making terrible progress. Whereas yesterday, having had a bit more experience, I was like able to see the woods for the trees and realize, yeah, what's one bad workout in the grand scheme of a full year of training, of a full lifetime of training? Like, it's really not going to make a difference at all. And I just pulled the weight back and just phoned it in and got the workout done, which is the most important thing. But that's actually probably the biggest thing that I have to instill in people, is that just being consistent is the most important thing. Not even having a good or a bad workout, but literally just showing up for long enough for like the work to amount into something.
Yeah, that's something I think people do struggle with as well. Like, it's like, they have one bad workout, they're like, oh, I'm shit, I'm giving up.
Yeah, totally. Like I'm really bad at playing guitar, but there's a lot of guitarists that I look up to, and I find guitar is really handy for me for being able to relate to people who are coming into fitness for the first time, because it's a similar thing where you're trying to get good at something, and I'm able to put myself in the mindset of a beginner. And like when you actually take a step back and look at, I think people like one of the biggest mistakes people make in fitness is that they just focus on really tiny details that more often than not really don't make a difference. Because if they did make a difference, you'd see like all these people who are getting results would only be doing things one way, and everybody who's not getting results would be doing the opposite of that. Whereas if you actually look at what all the people who get results have in common, like from what I can tell, it's literally just that they show up consistently and they have like a base level of an intelligent plan. And when I say a base level, like, I mean, it really does not have to be very intelligent at all. Like, as long as you're doing like compound exercises that you're trying to progressively overload when it feels good, and you're having some recovery in there, and you're eating and sleeping enough. Outside of that, the only thing that really everybody seems to have in common that gets results is that they've done it long enough to warrant getting results from it. Whereas I see people like hyper focus on little details, but then they're missing like every second or third workout, and it's just never going to make a difference.
Yeah. It probably doesn't help as well that we're sold that you have to like minutely do everything to get any result.
Yeah, I think the reason the fitness industry does that is because it's too simple to sell to people. Will Walsh, who you had on your podcasts, when he was on mine, said this about like, you know, like Men's Health. So it's like the biggest fitness magazine in the world probably, and there's a new issue every week, or I don't know how often it comes out, but they've obviously done probably thousands of issues at this point. And like, it's always contradicting itself. It's like avocados are good for you this month, and next week avocados make you fast. And, you know, next month it's like lift with high reps, then it's lift with low reps. And it's like, if they actually put all the stuff that we know and is useful, you'd only need like a couple of issues of it and that would be it. But that wouldn't be a very good business model. And I think that the problem is that it's not very profitable to tell people the stuff that actually works, because, you know, it's a few very small points and then that's it. And then it's like, just go off and do it now. Whereas if you keep on adding new wrinkles to things, new exercises you should try, this new method, this new diet, it creates products for people to buy, and that generates revenue for a supplement company or an influencer or whoever. So like, the internet has just created so much confusion because people are getting information from people who don't really care about them making progress. They care about them buying stuff.
Yeah. What would be some of your like biggest pet peeves that you see out there on the internet telling people for fit when it comes to fitness?
The pain and injury stuff is a really big pet peeve of mine, just because I went through it myself, and it really derails my my training and just my mental state for a long time. So I'm sure anybody who's listening has come across quote unquote movement experts or biomechanical specialists or mobility specialists or whatever, all these kind of self-appointed titles that don't really mean anything on social media. And it's people basically saying that if you're moving in a way that's asymmetrical or deviates from their version of perfect form, then you can expect to get hurt or to experience pain. And until you fix those things, you're kind of like a dysfunctional mover, and you're always going to be setting yourself up for injury. And I mean, that's still the mainstream belief in fitness. It's still a mainstream idea that like, if you don't have a neutral back when you're picking something up off the floor, you're going to hurt yourself. If your knees cave in on a squat, you're going to tear them. If your shoulders roll forward when you pull or push something, you're going to injure your rotator cuff. You know, there's all these kind of like truisms that don't actually have any solid evidence behind them. But it's a really compelling narrative because it sounds like it should be true. It sounds like, you know, oh, everything is meant to be symmetrical because like, as humans, we inherently value things that are symmetrical and even, and our bodies aren't actually like that. You know, we've got different organs on one side of our body to the other. Most people have one hand that's more dominant than the other, an arm or a leg that's a little bit shorter than the other. And yeah, that's probably my biggest pet peeve, because it really does. I've encountered some people that's really screwed them up mentally. Like, it's almost, I think it's actually almost spawning like a new type of body dysmorphia, or like mental disorder or whatever around people's bodies, where like I've had people come in where like they have all these fixations on like, oh, my hip shifts to one side and I can't feel like this part of my ab engaging when I do a squat, and like my posture isn't right, and they want to fix all of these things that don't actually, there's no evidence that they're a problem or that they need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And that there's actually solid research showing that if you tell people that that stuff is a problem, they can start creating pain sensations where there doesn't need to be any, and start believing that they're in pain. And well, they are in pain, but they've kind of manifested it because of their beliefs. So I had that with my knee. I injured that doing a squat, or it was kind of a chronic thing. I just was squatting really heavy for a little bit too long and overdid things. But you know, by listening to those people, I just stopped squatting heavy for like a year and a half or so, and was doing all of these like correctional exercises, as they called them. And my knee pain just got worse because not only was I not actually doing stuff to progressively like expose my knee to more loads that I could get back to squatting, I was expecting that it should hurt all the time if I like moved in a weird way or my foot rolled in when I was walking or whatever. And then the big revelation for me was when I went and actually started looking at the research around this, started listening to people who are actual experts in the research. And then my knee got better from just going back to squats and just starting with a lightweight that didn't aggravate it and gradually adding it. And I guess going back to what we were just talking about there, how profitable is that as a solution to somebody's problems? You know, like it's very hard to keep. I mean, I don't know what the physiotherapy model is like here, but I know certainly in places like the US, where like a lot of these really big like rehab social media gurus operate, it's actually more profitable to keep somebody coming back for repeated sessions, because if you do your job well as a physio, it kind of hurts your bottom line because the person comes to you for 1 or 2 sessions and they're gone.
Yeah.
But if you give them 1,000,001 things that they need to fix, well, that could just go on ad nauseum forever because they're never going to be, you know, truly fixed. So that was a very long-winded ramble answer to your question, but that really annoys me just because there's something very insidious, I think, about creating fear of movement, especially nowadays when, like, God, if there's anything that people need to do more, it's move. You know, we don't need more excuses for people to not be moving and exercising.
Yeah, I suppose as well, like you'll probably find this yourself as well. Like, you know, 90% of clients will come into you and be like, oh, I have a problem with my back or my knee or, you know, this, so I can't do this.
Yeah. And that's annoying as well because, yeah, these people make my job harder because, especially if they've heard this from a doctor or somebody like that, who we kind of inherently place a lot of value on their opinion in society. You know, you're putting me in a position where I basically need to tell the person that their doctor is full of shit, which generally doesn't go down well. So you have to play this like very, very tiring psychological game of trying to like just like gently push the person into, okay, he said that, you know, deadlifts are bad for your back. Let's try this exercise where we just squat a dumbbell up off the ground, and we won't call that a deadlift. And this isn't a squat, it's a sit to stand. And you know, you got to kind of gently lead them away from the BS and tell them, oh yeah, this is great for engaging your abs and your glutes, and it's literally just a deadlift with the bar. But so that's frustrating as well because they make our jobs very, very difficult and create a lot of hurdles to that person actually getting into exercise.
Yeah. I suppose the other issue here as well is when people go to the doctors, if they go to a doctor with like a muscular shoulder or something injury, they either like get sent on for an MRI or get sent home with painkillers or anti-inflammatories, whereas another place you might be referred to a physio that could kind of get you away from that.
Yeah. And you know, I don't know what the exact reason for why that happens is. I think maybe part of it is just like a fear of being exposed to a certain amount of liability if like let's say, to give them the benefit of the day, that's a doctor who does know that strength training is potentially a good thing that's going to help somebody with their back pain, but they're not confident that Mary sitting across from them is going to know what to do if she goes off in the fly fit by herself and starts trying to do a deadlift. Maybe she loads way too much weight on the bar and ends up making it worse. And then she's going to say, well, you said this was going to work, and now I've just herniated a disc.
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, oh, shit, I should have just given her the painkillers, because the worst that happens there is it just kind of stays the same, So maybe that's part of it. And then another part is that they just genuinely don't get the education in college that would justify them being able to prescribe exercise to people or rehab stuff. Doctors, don't get me wrong, are fantastic and are obviously extremely knowledgeable within the area that they're educated in. But I just think there's a massive misconception in society that anything that falls into the realm of health or even sometimes fitness is something that a doctor should be expected to be an expert on. And I think people sometimes aren't aware of the fact that there's people who are specialists in certain areas and their opinion should hold more weight. Like a registered dietitian should be the person that you should care more about in terms of their opinion when you're asking are carbs good or bad, than a doctor who wrote a book.
Yeah, no, I agree. And is that I suppose there's probably not, it's a growing, the likes of physiotherapy, the likes of nutritionists, as registered nutritionists, not overnight ones, and dietitians, they're kind of growing and the knowledge of them is growing. So people don't know to go to anyone else bar the doctor.
Yeah.
The internet is kind of helping that, but also kind of letting other people in who shouldn't be allowed to give advice in as well.
Yeah, this is the problem. I've had this chat with a lot of people on my own podcast and asked them kind of what their perspective on it is. And I think that kind of the most common diagnosis of what the issue is that the barrier to entry is definitely just way too low for the fitness industry. In that, and it's never a guarantee, because obviously I shit on physios a lot and there's some great ones out there and there's some terrible ones out there, but at least if there's a higher barrier to entry, it means there's a base level of knowledge that you've had to prove that you have. So it at least filters out some of the really dangerous stuff that you could get people doing. It's never a guarantee that you're going to have a great experience every time you go to see a physio, but at least there's a base level of competency you can expect to get. Anybody could turn around tomorrow and say they're a personal trainer or a nutritionist and start a social media page, start selling products, start selling programs, start coaching people, whatever. And there's no legal recourse for that, in the same way that there's legal recourse if you impersonate a doctor, there's legal recourse if you pretend to be a physio when you're actually not a chartered physio. And so I think that there is a certain section of people working in the industry who really don't care enough about helping people, and they just kind of want to make an easy buck. And they've observed that if you're willing to maybe push certain ethical boundaries to the side, you can actually make quite a bit of money in the fitness industry. It's much harder to do if you're trying to do things in a nice way for people. And I think that if you just made the barrier a little bit higher, those people would just go somewhere else, because it's interesting to see actually a lot of people who are kind of hucksters now that you'll see in a few years actually just move into a different industry. There's I'm not gonna name the person just because I don't want to open myself to any kind of defamation lawsuits or anything like that. But I talked to somebody before who knows the person who is one of the owners of let's say a very popular fitness recovery product that may or may not involve rolling up and down on something. And prior to making this product, this person was selling, I think it was crappy mobile phones or something like that would break after a few uses, but they were kind of sold at a discount rate or whatever. And so people like that just kind of jump back and forth between industries when they see an opportunity to make money out of stuff. But if that person wouldn't have been able to put that product out without having to go to college or get some kind of an education or something like that. They might just say, it's not worth the hassle, I'll move on to something else instead.
Yeah.
So now the problem is the odds of that happening, I would say even within our lifetime, are probably very slim. So I think that in the short term, it's really unfortunately up to the consumer to educate themselves. So I think that the best thing we can do is kind of give some people some tips about what they can do to find somebody who's credible, and how to filter information to kind of detect when somebody is talking a lot of crap versus somebody who really cares about helping somebody and knows their stuff.
Yeah, I get you. I suppose, like, you know, if they are telling you something that sounds inherently boring and too easy,
Yeah.
they might actually, they're the ones that are onto something.
Yeah, and you know, like I think a lot of people unfortunately just have to go through the cycle of trying the stuff that seems like more of a quick fix a few times before they come around to that idea that it might take, you know, some actual long-term habit changes and changing your lifestyle to make fitness like a long-term thing.
Yeah.
And that's okay, you know, like, I mean, a lot of people have to go through that, and it's a shame they have to waste some money and time at the start, but at the same time, I don't expect people to be given an easy and a hard option from the outset and not just go for the easy option.
That's true. Yeah. I suppose the other thing as well is a lot of the people, like myself included, who would talk about basically the kind of same kind of stuff you're saying, like, we've already gone through it. So that's how we know that it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I find that, you know, when we were talking at the start about who my demographic is, I've noticed that I get a lot of people who work in like STEM related fields, or like, say, IT or technology or stuff like that. And I think part of the reason for that is because in order to be good at those fields, you have to develop good critical thinking. And I think people who have good critical thinking skills are better at being able to detect if somebody is trying to sell them bullshit, and they're better at being able to notice if somebody seems to be speaking in like a logical, scientific manner, you know. So in some ways, like, the type of training that I do with people, it's inherently just going to appeal to some people more than others, just because of the fact that it's a little bit more nuanced and doesn't promise as much up front, but I can at least say, like, well, look, here's all the evidence that it works. And you know, if you're going to be more convinced by somebody with their top off in an Instagram photo or whatever who looks really jacked, then there's probably nothing I'm going to say anyway that's going to convince you, so I'd be wasting my time.
Yeah, I suppose as well, though, like, people who work in those kind of industries are used to spending a lot of time doing their job as well. So if you explain to them this is going to take more time, well, they're like, well, yeah, like, you know, writing code or doing, like, you know, research and stuff like that takes hours. So why wouldn't this?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just like it. And I don't know if you did this, but when I started training people, I would try quite hard to try to convince them that either I knew what I was talking about, or that, you know, training with me would be a good idea, or doing the type of training that I was recommending would be a good idea. And yeah, after a while, I kind of noticed that all the people who decided they wanted to train with me had actually pretty much already made up their minds. They just needed me to kind of like open the door for them.
Yeah.
I can't really think of too many times, and actually none spring to mind, where somebody has come in and been totally opposed to the idea of like doing a progressive strength training program, and then I've just said something that's like made them completely change their opinion. You know, I think that it's too hard, and too much of a commitment of time and energy, the whole like resistance training thing, and making it a part of your lifestyle, for you to just convince somebody into it. Like, it's not like being a clothes salesman and convincing someone to buy an expensive pair of jeans. Like, yeah, it might be a bit of money, but like, if you don't like them, you can just bring them back. But to convince somebody to come in and push themselves a little bit more each week, and commit to doing stuff that really it pushes you outside of your comfort zone, I think somebody has to come to that themselves and decide it's something that they want to do.
Yeah, true. And normally by the time they get to you, they already know.
Yeah, like we said, they probably tried the easier stuff and failed at it and realized, okay, maybe this was kind of some magic beans I was being sold.
What would be most what kind of, like, say, I suppose nutrition, maybe diet questions, do you get a lot of them from guys, like, and how would they kind of frame? I just want to see in relation to women, because I normally deal with women, so that's
yeah I get pretty basic stuff, just asking about, like, what are some good foods to eat, how much protein should I be getting in, how many carbohydrates and stuff like that. And I try to simplify it. I actually think that nutrition is like the most needlessly overcomplicated part of the whole fitness industry. And I don't know why, but I find discussions about the minutiae of nutrition just extremely monotonous. And I don't know, like people turn nutrition into a religion, like about like whether or not you eat fats or not, or whether or not you eat meat or not. Like, again, like I always try to take stuff from like a really wide angle view, like just see what are the commonalities between things. Are you familiar with the blue zones or blue regions on the earth?
I think I've heard of it, but not familiar now.
Yeah, so they're like the regions that have the highest density of centenarians, I think is the word, as like a proportion of their population. So people who've lived to 100 or older.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about it is that all of these areas, they might on the surface level look like they're different and they're eating different foods, but actually if you take it at base principles, there's actually a lot of things that they have in common. So the majority of them are mostly plant-based. So that doesn't mean that they're vegan or vegetarian, but the majority of their diet is plants. And then they might get their protein from other things as well, like fish or a little bit of meat, but it doesn't make up like the majority of their diet. So they're fundamentally plant-based. They get a lot of exercise. It tends to be like rural communities. So communities where they're all like outdoors farming and doing stuff like that. So they get a lot of exercise, a lot of like their NEAT, as you'd call it, would be quite high. They're getting lots of steps in, and they're out in the fresh air all day, getting lots of sunshine and whatever. And then another really interesting thing that probably gets overlooked is that they there's a very strong sense of community in the whatever the population is. So I think maybe like the Mormons or something like that, or the Amish is one of them in America. And there's some other, I think there's a place in somewhere in Italy, maybe like Sicily. There's an island in Japan as well. And you can look it up anyway. It's very interesting. But anyway, the point of that is that really, in terms of like the health aspect of things, all I really care about is at each meal, somebody is trying to get in a protein source, which more often than not accounts for fat as well, fruit or veg, and some kind of carbohydrate as well. And then ideally, whatever they're having with that is going to be either water or something very close to it, like a coffee or a tea or something like that. And if most people just tried to make every meal look like that, they'd be much closer to the principles of what the diet looks like for those blue zones on Earth. And then the main thing that I need to kind of, a lot of the people who come to me are looking to gain muscle, which requires gaining weight. So the main thing that I try to get them to track is just calories and protein, because that really does the job for the majority of people. So I'll usually get them to, I actually only started doing this recently, and I think that it's worked very well for keeping people accountable for eating enough and getting their protein. Is I take their body weight at the start of each session, unless I make it very clear to them that it's not something they have to do. Obviously not everybody is going to be comfortable with getting their body weight measured. I don't want to feed into any kind of eating disorders or anything like that somebody might have had in the past or anything like that. So I make sure that, number one, gaining weight is something that they want to do and it's part of their goals, and then that they're comfortable with the body weight being taken. But I take the body weight every time they come in, and that gives me an idea of, you know, a trend line of what their body weight is looking like over time, if it's going up or not. The nice thing I find, and probably one reason why I don't put too much emphasis on nutrition, is that I think that the training says a lot and reflects a lot about how somebody's nutrition is.
Yeah.
So I used to not take the body weight because of just how reflective the training was of it. Like if somebody is getting stronger, you know, in a rep range of say like 6 to 12, they kind of have to be building muscle, because that's the adaptation that allows you to do that, along with a bit of strength increase as well. There's no way you're going to go from being able to do, you know, 60 kilos for 12 reps to 100 kilos for 12 reps and not have gained a substantial amount of muscle. The reason why I started taking the body weight is that if somebody doesn't have a good session, it gives me a lot of feedback then about what might be going on, about whether it's the training that's an issue or whether it's the diet. So if somebody comes in and they have a really bad session where they're not able to hit any of the target weights, and their body weight is down by like a kilo from what their usual one is, then I can make a pretty decent guess that they probably haven't been eating enough food recently. And generally, any time when you lose some body weight like that, it impacts your strength. Whereas if I didn't have that, I'd be thinking about, okay, maybe they're doing too much in the gym, or maybe I need to change something about the training program. And then vice versa, if their body weight is on target, and there's no mad fluctuations in it, then I'll think, okay, we're going to change something about the training. So I try to make all the nutrition stuff that I do tie into the performance aspect of the training.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. Do you find the guys, do they like have any problem with putting on weight, or do they like struggle to eat more?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Now that might just be, I might not be getting like a representative sample, in the sense that like if you're coming to a strength coach and paying money, it's probably because you're somebody who's tried to do it by yourself and has struggled to gain muscle. If you go into the gym and within the first few months, you know, you've added loads of weight to the bar and you're starting to get pretty jacked, then where are you going to pay somebody to help you? So I'm probably getting people who naturally struggle a little bit with gaining weight. And the number one thing I find, and I had this experience as well, like I was never like overly skinny, but I did struggle a little bit with putting on muscle when I first tried, is that everybody thinks that they're eating enough. And generally, if you think that, it's a pretty strong sign that you're not, because just about anybody who has struggled with putting on weight and then managed to do it will know what it's like, because there's going to generally be at least you know, one meal a day where you're going to have to kind of force feed yourself a bit and feel really uncomfortable and bloated and full. Now to somebody listening to this who's, you know, trying to lose weight or body fat, they might think that just sounds insane. Like, why would somebody want to do that? But, you know, that's the people that I work with, is generally people who want to get stronger and put on muscle. And that can be a challenge for people for different reasons. A lot of the time, they're afraid that they're going to get fat is the main one. That if they start eating more food, they're going to start putting on more body fat. I've, like I said, trained women before, and I'm sure that you've had that be one of the major obstacles, is that they tend to especially be afraid that any amount of weight gain is going to result in visible body fat coming onto them. Of course, gaining weight is going to include some body fat, but, you know, if we do it in an intelligent way where it's not massive amounts of weight gain and the quality of food is good and you're training hard, then you'll look great, because the majority of it will be muscle, and that'll account for any small amount of body fat that you put onto your body.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest one, is people being afraid of putting on body fat. So I tend to try, in the same way that I try to do like the minimum effective dose with training, I try to apply the same thing to nutrition, where like ideally somebody will have pretty similar meals day to day. And if they're doing that, it's very easy to make changes to their diet without having to do a load of tracking. Like if you have the same breakfast every morning, let's say like it's a bowl of porridge, and I get you to, I don't like it, but some people do, just say like put in a scoop of whey protein into that. We've
Yeah.
immediately increased your calories and your protein intake on a daily basis. And that will that will result in a small increase in muscle mass over the period of a few weeks or whatever. And when it goes on slow enough like that, people don't freak out, and they notice that it actually makes a huge difference to their performance in the gym. Like you can get a really, really big performance effect out of gaining like just a kilo of body weight.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Like it's smart as well. You're saying like just adding the scoop of whey protein. It's something that's very simple.
Yeah.
Again, nothing too.
And that's why, like, again, I don't try to get into the weeds of nutrition too much, because I don't feel that I'm really the person to be working with somebody who needs more than that. Like if somebody is really struggling with getting their diet in order, there might be a lot of other stuff going on as well. And from talking to people who are nutritionists, it sounds very frustrating, because like you probably get into it because you really love like the science of nutrition and trying to find out like the exact amount of like carbs somebody should be eating and how many saturated fats, polyunsaturated, whatever. But you actually end up being almost more like a therapist for people, because the hurdle for people with nutrition isn't knowing what to do. I don't really buy this thing that like most people don't fundamentally understand that McDonald's isn't a great thing to be eating for every single meal of the day. I think if you held up with like a stalk of broccoli and a Big Mac and asked people to guess which is better for them, most people would choose the stalk of broccoli. It's making that decision that's difficult, and that's tied into so much other stuff. Could be like emotional trauma, your environment, the stresses that are going on in your lives. Like a lot of people use food as a coping mechanism for things. And I just think you need to go see a specialist who specializes in that and can guide you through that if, you know, you have all of those issues going on. There are some people, and generally the people that I work with fall into this category, who I could just be like, here's some good foods for you to try to make most of your meals involve. Here's how you track stuff on MyFitnessPal, blah, 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 blah. And that works really well. But if it doesn't, then I think you should go and see somebody who can properly guide you through the nutrition stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's more prevalent in women than men. But that said, like eating disorders and stuff are on the rise in men.
Yeah, I think social media has done no favors for people in that sense.
Yeah, because I suppose like I know growing up, like obviously it was all like, you know, skinny, be like this, but there was magazines and everything, and it was in your face constantly. Whereas for guys, not so much. But now you've got like you have the same issue that it's on in your hand in your phone, like so you could be scrolling through a load of ripped men and suddenly you don't feel so great. Like,
and I think it's human nature to compare ourselves to people, but never at any point in human history could you compare yourself to the top few thousand most jacked, good-looking people in the world instantly by scrolling through your social media feed. And I think people forget that like those people don't become like the biggest influencers in the world by accident. Life's unfair from the point of view that like if you don't look a specific way, you're just not going to get a following like that, or at least not in the context of what they're doing, like, you know, fitness and stuff like that. So it's very easy to forget that like you're literally comparing yourself to probably like the top 0.1% of people in the world who fit that perfect mold of like what's considered like an ideal aesthetic. And also you have no idea if they're actually happy or not. You know, anybody can make themselves look very happy and fulfilled on social media. And I'm not saying all of them are this way, but I know lots of people who have met these influencers, and it's like that whole thing of like never meet your heroes, because they can be very different people in real life. often the personality traits that like lend themselves to helping you succeed in that area don't really coincide with being a very good person or a very good friend. You have to be very focused on creating an image that people will like, and yeah, so like you never know what's going on in somebody else's life. Just because somebody looks really happy and successful on social media doesn't mean that that's actually the case in real life.
Yeah, but that's the whole point of social media, isn't it? You just show people your
Yeah,
best spots.
and it's a tough one to navigate. I deleted mine at one point for about 2 months back in 2020. It was before the lockdown came in, actually. And it was a nice, enjoyable experience. But I think actually I don't think it's as simple as like just deleting Instagram, for example, because what I noticed was that I just kept trying to do the same stuff but on different apps. So
Mm.
like I hadn't touched Facebook in years, but as soon as I deleted Instagram, all of a sudden I was like, I wonder what's going on Facebook. And then I got rid of Facebook and I was like, oh, what's going on YouTube? So like I think that it's more about you kind of need to really address like why is it that you want to go on these, and like figuring out ways to manage your time so that you're not wasting your time when you're on there. I think the number one thing I learned was actually just to follow less people.
Yeah.
I've unfollowed so many people since I did that little experiment, because I just kind of stopped and thought about it, and I was like, you know, this isn't adding anything to my experience. And there was a lot of people I was following who like I kind of found some of the stuff that they posted annoying, but I think that some people almost enjoy that. It's kind of like entertainment for them. Like, you know, that thing of like following the person you went to school with just to kind of see what's going on in their life, but like you're not actually mates with them at all, you know?
Yeah, or like
Um,
people you don't like, but they post really stupid stuff, so you follow them just to be like, you again.
yeah, exactly. And
Have a few of
I
those.
mean, it's not doing anything positive for either person's life, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that even though like it's kind of vilified a little bit, I think there's a lot to be said for creating a little bit of a bubble for yourself on social media, as long as you're very aware that that's something that you're doing, you know. I don't want to see what Liver King is posting every single day when I go onto my social media.
Yeah, I actually the way you mentioned that about having a bubble, I realized that like last year at one point I was like, oh yeah, diet culture is dead. Nobody cares about that anymore, because literally all the people I follow talk about like having balance and stuff like that. And then
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'd be meeting new people in the gym and they'd be asking me the same questions that like you
Mhm.
get from diet culture. I'd be like, oh damn, that's still alive and well.
Yeah, yeah. And that is like what I mean when I say that like you have to be very aware that you have created this artificial little world that doesn't actually represent reality.
Yeah.
Um, because the average person are like really still is getting that kind of information that's outdated by decades now, you know.
Mm.
I mean, like going back to what I was saying earlier about how like one of my biggest pet peeves is like all that like dysfunctional movement crap or whatever. For a while there, I started falling into that trap where I was like, wow, there's like real change starting to happen. People are starting to realize this is a load of bullshit. And then I realized like, oh, I've actually just unfollowed loads of pages. And then like you said, I would meet people who'd be asking me questions and stuff like that. And I realized like, oh, you know, this is probably more alive and well than it's ever been before.
Yeah.
There's a guy that I follow who I think is phenomenal at like communicating the research and all this topic. His name is Greg Lehman, and he's got a really good blog where he does kind of reviews of research around pain and injury. And like he says that he's literally been talking about this stuff since the 90s and he hasn't seen any change at all. And it's kind of like um people will kind of like pretend to change to kind of like supplicate the evidence-based people, but they're actually still fundamentally preaching the same message. They just kind of dressed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like your man Squat University does that a lot. Like he kind of has this like very contradictory message of like oh, everybody everybody should be doing strength training. There's like, it's amazing for your health and your longevity, but only if you do it the way that I say is good, you know? So it's like two really contradictory messages. Knees over toes guy does that as well. And I don't know what my opinion is of him, because some of the stuff he says is good. Again, it's all about like, your body is highly adaptable. There's nothing wrong with driving your knees over your toes or doing Jefferson curls where you purposely range your back over and strengthen through that range of motion. But God help you if you sit in an office chair all day, because your back is going to be fucked, because there's no way you could possibly adapt to sitting down. That's like a totally different thing, you know?
That's actually, yeah, that's very contradictory.
Yeah. So like, I see that a lot where like it looks like things are changing, but really a lot of these people they're just trying to kind of avoid ridicule by kind of like pandering to like coaches, you know?
Yeah, just like
trying to avoid being memed.
I'm sure they've gotten plenty of memes at this point.
Oh yeah, big time. Great content for me.
Yeah. All right, I think that's everything I have to ask you, but just before you go, where can everyone find you?
Probably the main place would be Instagram. So my handle on there is Cill O'Connor. So CILLOCONNOR. And there's a link tree link there in my bio for looking up my services. So I've got a website, KillianO'Connor.net. So there's links on Instagram and on there about how to sign up for personal training or online coaching, which would be the two main services that I kind of offer. And hopefully at some point in the next few months, I'm going to be putting out an ebook as well with like a strength program that people can follow if they don't want to do coaching.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So and I have my own podcast as well, Philosophy of Strength. So that's on Spotify, but you can also find the link on Instagram as well.
Yeah, I'll link the podcast as well and your handle and everything in the show notes as well. So if anyone does want to go check it out, I highly suggest you do. Cool. And yeah, just as ever, guys, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok, and it's Chrissy H Fitness. And then on my website is www.chrissyhawkins.com. So thanks again for joining us today, Kill.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Why Not podcast. It really means a lot that you are listening in, and I would love if you could please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or subscribe on Spotify. And always, I'd love to hear feedback personally, so if you do want to leave me a message and let me know how you found the podcast, please do.